future.
In recent years, heightening tensions between Russia and the West have seen the use of nuclear weapons return to discussion. Take a look at this 2020 broadcast from a state-owned Russian TV channel, creatively named Russia 1, in which they explore some options for dealing with Britain in the case of a nuclear exchange.
Погрузить Британию в морскую пучину российский подводный робот-беспилотник «Посейдон». Он приближается к цели на километровой глубине со скоростью 200 км в час. Нет никакого способа остановить этот подводный дрон. Боеголовка на нем мощностью до 100 мегатонн. Взрыв этой термоядерной торпеды у берегов Британии поднимет гигантскую волну, цунами высотой до 500 метров. Такой водяной шквал является еще и носителем экстремальных доз радиации. Пройдя над Британскими островами, он превратит то, что от них, может быть, еще и останется, в радиоактивную пустыню, надолго непригодную хоть для чего-то.
Setting aside the madness of calmly explaining how you would go about eradicating tens of millions of men, women and children, complete with graphics and animations, let's have a little talk about this. Firstly, as an Irish man, I have a vested interest in this. You'll probably notice Britain is Ireland's neighbour. Now, we haven't always had the best neighbourly relations, but I wouldn't want to see them get nuked. Partly because I live here. And if you look very closely at this graphic, you may notice that they literally wiped me off the fucking map. What did I ever do to you? Ireland's a neutral country. Does that not matter? Are we just collateral damage? Is this even a realistic depiction of what would happen? Or is this just over-exaggerated propaganda? Let's see. The bomb they're talking about here is called the Poseidon. It's a submarine-launched torpedo designed to be detonated off the coast of port cities and, well, destroy them, obviously. Reportedly, it can carry a warhead with a yield of up to 100 megatons. The most powerful nuclear weapon ever detonated was the Soviet Tsar bomber with a yield of 50 megatons. That created a fireball with a radius of around 3.5 kilometers and a total destructive radius of about 35 kilometers. The Tsar bomber could actually have had a yield of 100 megatons, putting it on par with the Poseidon, if they had used uranium-238 cladding instead of lead. However, the Soviets decided against a 100 megaton yield as the resulting pollution from nuclear fallout was deemed unacceptable, and it also would have wiped out the release plane and its crew with near certainty. So this raises our first question about the Poseidon. Considering it's launched from a submarine like a torpedo, and shockwaves travel a lot faster and further in water than they do in air, wouldn't the submarine and its crew be destroyed by their own weapon? I mean, if you're launching such a massive nuclear weapon, you probably already know that life for you after this point is not going to be sunshine and rainbows. But what crew in the world would press the button that absolutely guarantees that the submarine they're travelling on is about to be crushed like a tin can? Well, the Poseidon is like a torpedo, but it's not really a torpedo. It's more like a drone. Once it's launched, it can travel under its own power and has a guiding system that allows it to maneuver itself. It's basically like its own autonomous submarine. It has a range of up to 10,000 kilometers, and although this broadcast put its speed at around 200 kilometers per hour, more recent information suggests it's closer to 100 kilometers per hour. Regardless of what its top speed actually is, that's not really how it would travel. With a range of 10,000 kilometers, you can fire this thing pretty far away from your target. But if it's zooming through the water at above 100 kilometers per hour, it's going to be pretty easy to detect. It's estimated a Virginia-class submarine could detect such a drone traveling at such a speed from about 40 kilometers away. So the Poseidon would instead travel at very slow speed at a fairly shallow depth to avoid detection. It's the same strategy submarines have used since the latter part of World War I. At these speeds, it could take weeks for the Poseidon to reach its target. It only ramps up to top speed once it's within a few kilometers of its target. Basically, once there's no chance of stopping it. So yeah, the submarine that launches a Poseidon probably isn't going to have to worry about it. So what happens when this thing explodes? The Poseidon seems to be designed to maximize radioactive contamination rather than explosive destruction, a so-called salted bomb, where the aim is to contaminate as large an area as possible with radioactive fallout, which is pretty awful. You'd really rather just be vaporized. It's theorized the Poseidon could be equipped with a cobalt bomb for this purpose due to the properties of cobalt when it's exposed to neutron radiation during a nuclear explosion. This process transmutes natural cobalt into cobalt-60, a radioactive isotope with a half-life long enough to persist for decades, but short enough to release intense radiation before it decays. What does any of that mean in human terms? Well, let's say you're in an area heavily affected by the radiation of a cobalt bomb, but you're safe down below in your bomb shelter. If you managed to last 5 years in that shelter before coming up to the surface, the fallout would still be enough to kill you after about an hour's exposure. Better stay in your hidey hole. Let's say you managed to survive 50 years down there before coming up. Then you could withstand the exposure at the surface for a few days to a week. It'll only be completely safe up there in about 130 years. So really, a bomb shelter is useless. You need a whole self-sustaining underground civilization where the people that went down will never go back up. Their only hope is one day their descendants will return. Now, there's no evidence that anyone has ever constructed a cobalt bomb, but obviously it's a fairly evil device, so if anyone did make one, they probably wouldn't be telling the world. But it would align with the vision of the Poseidon sweeping the land with a giant radioactive tsunami. The broadcast mentions a wave 500 meters tall. That's taller than every building in New York City, bar the Freedom Tower. But is that realistic? Well, in 1958, an earthquake occurred in Lituya Bay, Alaska at an 8.2 moment magnitude. This triggered a 90 million ton rock slide, which resulted in a mega tsunami that reached heights of 524 meters, making it the largest ever recorded. So it is physically possible, but could a nuclear detonation cause such a thing? This is footage of the Crossroads Baker weapon test in which a 23 kiloton nuke was detonated 27 meters underwater. To get a sense of the scale, those are battleships all around it. This one is an aircraft carrier, about 400 meters away from the blast. Around 2 million tons of water and seabed sand was lifted to form a column 1,800 meters tall and 600 meters wide. The crashing water formed a tsunami about 29 meters high. By the time it reached Bikini Island, 6 kilometers away, the waves were less than 5 meters high. Pretty incredible visuals here, but the water moisture and fog really makes it look more dramatic than it was actually destructive. A 5 meter tall wave is obviously not going to cause the same level of devastation as the promised 500 meters, but the Poseidon is supposedly over 4,000 times more powerful than the bomb seen here. So is it still possible? Well, it's probably not as was claimed. Generally, a naturally occurring tsunami is unidirectional, whereas a tsunami caused by a nuclear blast is omnidirectional. This means its power is reduced much quicker as it travels in comparison to a natural tsunami, so a lot of this power is wasted going back out to sea. And look at the Baker test footage again. I mean, yeah, it does create a big wave, but most of the displaced water just went straight up into the air and then rained down. That's where pretty much all your nuclear fallout is going. It's not really leaving the area in a big radioactive tsunami. Most of it is traveling vertically, trapped in the water droplets. If you're still not convinced, let's look at a naturally occurring tsunami. You may remember in 2011, Japan was hit by a devastating tsunami that killed nearly 20,000 people. The tsunami originated from an earthquake that occurred approximately 72 kilometers off the coast and measured a whopping 9.0 moment magnitude, making it the 4th most powerful earthquake ever recorded in the world. And those waves didn't come close to even 100 meters. I tried looking up what the equivalent energy release would be in megatons and got answers ranging from 475 megatons to 32 gigatons. Apparently, only a small fraction of the energy released in both earthquakes and nuclear blasts is actually radiated as seismic waves, and that varies significantly depending on a variety of factors, such as site location. So, where did they get this 500 meters from? Nobody seems to know. It's a pretty dubious claim. If I had to guess, I'd say they just looked up the biggest tsunami ever recorded, saw it was over 500 meters, put their hypothetical tsunami in the same ballpark, and claimed their bomb can create the same thing. Which is already very unlikely, but the idea that it'll travel kilometers to shore and wash over the nation is... well, it smells like bullshit. Now, would the Poseidon cause incredible destruction, devastating floods, and horrendous radiation? Yes, absolutely. But the way it was presented on this broadcast is more than a little bit exaggerated. It is an incredibly powerful bomb, but we should really be thanking them for deciding to detonate it underwater, because it would be orders of magnitude more destructive if it was detonated above land. You wouldn't have the same energy waste, you wouldn't have the fallout getting trapped around the blast zone. It would be horrible, but obviously they have nukes that do that too. And so do their enemies. The moral of the story is, don't play with nukes, and also, don't broadcast this kind of stuff to the world. I consider this a personal death threat, and that's not very nice, you lunatic. It's your family on the line here too, unless Putin has assured you a place in his bunker. Oh, he actually might have. Is it too much to ask the powers that be not to blow us all up, or drown us in floods, or poison us with radiation? I don't think so. I also don't think it's too much to ask for you to subscribe if you liked this video. Until next time, stay safe. Well, try your best. It might be out of your hands.
He threatened me at one point and said, Boris, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile it would only take a minute or something like that, jolly. But I think from the very relaxed tone that he was just playing along.